Before I get started, I just wanted to thank everyone who has supported the channel. We recently just hit 2,000 subscribers. I'm appreciative of how much the women's basketball community and this channel has grown. Y'all have been blowing up the channel lately. There will be a lot of good videos coming during March, but don't go anywhere in the off season. There's going to be content and things to talk about even after the tournament is over. Now that's out the way, it's time to start the video. There has been no shortage of talented basketball players this season, but who are the players that stand out above the rest? It's important to note that this is not an all-time list, what a player will look like the rest of their college career, or how they will be in the WNBA, just how they are playing in college and how they compare to their college counterparts this year. I usually go over honorable mentions in my top 10s, but I will not be doing that this time because there's so many great players. Talking about honorable mentions would be never ending. There are three major things I'm looking for. The first being, what does a player look like during the biggest games? Because anyone can put crazy numbers against lower level competition. But how do they look against the best teams on their schedule? The second thing I'm looking for is how good does a player look when against other elite players at their positions? If you are one of the best, you need to be able to beat the best. Last but not least, I look for players that can impact the games in other ways besides scoring, because everyone has off games. But a major difference between good players and great players is they find ways to still help their team win without scoring. But that's enough of that. It's time to talk about the rankings. The number 9 and 10 spot were very hard for me. I feel pretty strongly about the first 8, but I debated the last 2 spots between several different players. I finally settled with Alissa Pili. Her last game was absolutely awful, probably the worst in her career, but that doesn't take away from the dominant season she's been having. She is everything to Utah. With Gianna Kniepkens being out, Pili is the first, second, and third option. She is one of the most efficient scorers in the entire country. She averages 21 points on 55%, shooting from the field and 40% from 3. She's one of the hardest people to guard in college basketball. She can shoot the 3, mid-range, and has an arsenal of post moves. If that wasn't enough, she is also able to drive to the basket, and at her size, there's not much that can be done about it. The perfect example is when she dropped 37 points on South Carolina, while shooting a ridiculous 65% from the field. No one has been able to score that many points against them on that level of efficiency, and no one will. The only reason I don't have Alissa Pili higher is because it's very hard for her to impact the game if she's having an off night. She is a decent defender and a decent passer, and she can get some boards, but she's just decent at those things, not elite. It's not often she has an off night, but if she does, Utah is completely screwed. At number 9, I'm going with Liz Kitley. She puts up ridiculous numbers at 23 points per game and 12 rebounds on 55% shooting from the field. When you have a 6'6" player that has a lethal mid-range, there's not much you can do. She's able to score at a high level and is efficient. Her fadeaway is her signature move, and it's completely unblockable at her height. Defensively, she struggles against really skilled post players, but she does very well on help defense. Smaller guards who try to score on her either get blocked or are forced to jack up a terrible shot. Every now and then, you'll see an ACC post just completely embarrass themselves. Many people challenge Kitley, but few succeed. Most importantly, she had led her team to wins. They are first in the ACC. But the reason I can't put her any higher is because her performance, specifically her efficiency, plummets against really good post players. Maddie Westbeld, Anissa Morrow, a rusty Angel Reese dominated Kitley on both ends of the floor. Even Hannah Hidalgo was giving Kitley the business before she got in foul trouble. I gotta take points off for that. She did do really well against Tiana Jackson and Michaela Timpson, so I give her credit there. But the ACC is right there with the Big Ten in terms of having the weakest post-play competition out of any major conference. When you have someone as good as Liz Kitley, they need to consistently dominate against elite post players. But we have not seen that. Despite the criticisms I gave, Liz Kitley is a very good player. She was pivotal to Virginia Tech's postseason last year. I'm not entirely sure of the status of her injury, but regardless if she comes back or not, I think she's done enough to show she was a top 10 player this year. At number 8, I'm going with Angel Reese. Despite being forced out of her natural position, Angel Reese has still had a great season. She's still putting up double-doubles almost every game. and she's the leading scorer and leading rebounder on LSU. It says a lot when you're on a team loaded with talent, but you still stick out above the rest. That makes you a top 10 player. Angel Reese does not have a jump shot, which comes up a lot, but she's still one of the best players in college, despite not being able to consistently score 5 feet from the basket. It doesn't matter if she can't shoot if people can't stop her from getting to the paint. Not only is Angel Reese a great help defender, she can defend even some of the best post players in the country. I give her huge credit for guarding the best post player on the opposing team each night. There's too many star players now guarding the 4th or 5th option on the floor. Her passing skills are very good for someone at her size and position. Angel Reese does struggle offensively against post players that are just as big or bigger than her. Her rebounding stats are also a bit inflated because a lot of times she's catching her own misses, which is why I can't put her higher, but she's still a very great player, and there's very few post players I would choose over her. Kiki Iriafen has to be the most underrated player in the country, and I don't think it's close. She barely gets any love outside of the Stanford fan base. There's the perception that Stanford is a one-person team and Cameron Brink is carrying. This could not be further from the truth. Kiki averages around 19 points, 11 rebounds, on 55% shooting, and this is with only an average of 27 minutes per game because Tara Vanderveer takes her players out in blowouts. If Tara let her players stat pad, Iriafen would easily average at least 25 and 15. Let's just go over a few of the ridiculous performances she had this year. She had 20 points and 10 rebounds against Indiana on only 12 shots, 30 points and 17 rebounds against Florida State, 25 points, 16 rebounds, and 5 assists against Utah. We could talk about the time she had 19 points and 19 rebounds versus Colorado, but I think her most notable performance was when she dropped 36 and 12 on an Oregon State team with a healthy Reagan Beers. That's just what she does. She's a double-double machine, and she's efficient. Her defense is not on the level of Cameron Brink's, but it's still pretty good. She should easily be an All-American, but she's getting hurt by the Brink is carrying Stanford narrative. South Carolina players are by far the hardest to evaluate. They are far and away the best team in college basketball. The best player changes literally every game. You'll never see a South Carolina player average a crazy stat line because their bench plays so much and there's always 5 people on the floor that can score the basketball. Dawn doesn't believe in having players play over 30 minutes against bad teams just to get a bunch of stats. However, I went with Kamilla Cardoso because she has been the best player for South Carolina at a higher frequency than everyone else. Cardoso doesn't always put up the crazy offense numbers, but her defense is always there. She's top 5 in defensive rating and defensive win shares per 40 minutes. Something that won't show up on the stat sheet is how many double teams she attracts. It's a big reason why you will see a South Carolina player get a wide open layup or open 3, despite them being so talented. Many teams are so scared of Cardoso, they overcompensate. One thing that's odd is that she is a lot more aggressive when she plays for Brazil. If she had that type of aggressiveness in college, she would be completely unstoppable. Now we move on to the top 5, or in other words, the All-American first team. Probably the most controversial placement in the entire list, but I'm going with Paige Bueckers as the 5th best player. She's extremely talented. She's a 6-foot guard that can just do about everything. She's extremely versatile and one of the best shooters in the country. She's averaging over 20 points while shooting 54% from the field, which is absurd for a guard. There's post players who only shoot close to the basket that can't match that. She's also shooting 40% from 3. If that wasn't enough, she shoots 86% from the free throw, so fouling her does nothing. She averages just under 4 assists, but only turns the ball over 1.4 times. That's an insane assist to turnover ratio. She's a good defender, as she averages 2 steals and 1 block a game. There's not much she can't do, so why don't I have her higher? Because in the biggest games of the year, the opposing team's guard outplays her every time. When I see Kiki Rice dropping a near triple-double, Sanaya Rivers getting a career high, Rory Harmon and Booker combining for 47, I have to take off points for that, especially considering the praise Paige gets as a defensive player. I didn't even mention Hannah Hidalgo or Tahina Paupau. This happens because Paige Bueckers is not able to defend quick guards. This was true even before her unfortunate ACL injury in college. She's great at many things, but this is by far her biggest weakness. I still have her in the top 5 because Despite her shortcomings, she's extremely versatile and one of the best shooters in the country. If I was building a team, there's only 4 players I would take over her. I think that there's some separation between the top 4 and everyone else. They are all players that led their teams to be some of the best in the country, but if you took them off their team, it's not an exaggeration to say they barely make the tournament. Who are those 4 players? One of them is Cameron Brink. Cameron Brink is at worst a top 3 defender in the entire country, and a strong argument can be made that she is the best defender in college basketball. She's the only player currently with 100 blocks for the season and leading the country with 3.6 blocks per game. People are so scared of her blocking the shot that many times people will either avoid her entirely or they will just throw up some crap and hope it goes in. On top of her defense, she has become an elite scorer this year. She averaged 18 points on a 54% field goal percentage, and that's with only 24 minutes of play. She shoots 39% from 3, which is better than even some guards. If you are an advanced stat person, you will love Cameron Brink. She's number 1 in player efficiency rating. She's number 1 in win shares per 40 minutes, number 1 in rebounds per 40 minutes, and has a top 3 defensive rating. She's finally cut down on her fouling, which is important considering how much Stanford needs her. It was a hard choice, but I left her out the top 3 due to her having Kiki Iriafen. The next 3 players don't have the luxury of playing with another all-American level post player. If they did, they would be doing even crazier stuff than what they are already doing now. Grand Theft Hidalgo is only a freshman, but it doesn't matter. The value Hannah Hidalgo brings to Notre Dame can't be overstated. Teams that lose half their roster due to injuries usually fall to the bottom of the conference. But when you have a player as special as Hidalgo, she prevents that from happening. This is extremely rare for a freshman, but she's already one of the best defenders in the entire country. It doesn't really matter which metric you want to use, whether you want to talk about her leading the country in steals per game, being number 1 in defensive win shares, or having a top 10 defensive rating. She's clearly an elite defender. She doesn't need to steal the ball to create trouble for the defense, but when she does steal the ball, it usually ends up turning into easy, fast break points. She is 3rd in points per game. She will hurt you on the drive, shoot a mid-range, or knock down a 3. She's very quick and finishes through contact and is great at drawing fouls. On top of being a great scorer and defender, she is a great passer. She is 2nd in the ACC in assists. At the beginning of the season, she struggled with this, but she has grown tremendously. Hannah Hidalgo is averaging a ridiculous stat line of 24 points per game, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists, and 5 steals. There's only one other major conference player averaging at least 25 and 5. Her name is Caitlin Clark. The best aspect of Hidalgo is the fact she doesn't fall off when the competition gets tough, whether that be UConn, Louisville, Virginia Tech, or South Carolina. She showed up. There was only one game against a tough team where she disappeared, and that was against NC State. Her turnovers and three-point shooting needs to improve, but it's nearly impossible to take her out of a game. Even when her shot is off, she can still distribute and lock down anybody. If Hannah Hidalgo is not a first-team All-American, I don't know what we are doing. She's on pace to have one of the greatest statistical seasons of all time, and she has proven she can lead her team to victory. I have Juju Watkins as the number 2 player in women's basketball. It's no secret Juju Watkins can score the basketball. She's averaging 28 points per game, and she scored 40 against a great defensive Colorado team. Stanford has the best statistical defense in the Pac-12 and a multi-time Defensive Player of the Year. That didn't stop Juju from putting a 50-piece dinner on their head. There's a lot of complaints about her shooting so many shots a game, but when you watch any USC game, you will see exactly why. That's what she has to do for them to win games, and seeing how they ranked number 5 in the country, it's working. There's no game plan that works on Juju Watkins. She's one of those players you have to hope she's off that day. And when she is off, you still have to deal with her defensive abilities. Juju Watkins is a very capable passer. There's many times where she tricks the defense because they think she'll take a shot just for her to hit the open person. However, there are definitely times where she takes an ill-advised shot when she could have settled down and got a better look for her or one of her teammates. That's a big reason why her field goal percentage is stuck at 42%. The elite scoring is just one half of Juju. She is already one of the scariest defenders in college basketball, which is by far the most underrated part of her game. She's the only player in the entire country averaging at least 2 steals and 1.5 blocks per game. Juju doesn't want to just be the best offensive player in the game. She wants to be the best defensive player too. Juju deniers love bringing up the game where she shot 6 from 32 from the field against Oregon State. But what they don't mention is that in the same game, Oregon State backcourt only scored a combined total of 10 points. Juju isn't always hot from the field, but she's going to make sure to shut someone else down. Just go to any box score on USC's schedule. You will see some players on the other team with some ugly stat lines, and that's why she's the second best player in the country. The least surprising entry on this list, but I'm going with Caitlin Clark as the number 1 player in college basketball. Caitlin Clark is like Patrick Mahomes. It's boring to say she's the best player in the country. It would drive way more engagement to bring up someone else's name and start arguments, but in reality, there really is only one answer. There's some people, specifically freshmen, that can potentially surpass Caitlin Clark in the future. But if we're talking about this year specifically, Caitlin Clark is the best. I'm someone that's very high on defense. I think the best players are ones who dominate both ends of the floor. Caitlin Clark is a rare exception to that. If she was just the leading scorer, I would not have her at number 1, but she's both first in points per game and first in assists. No one in the history of women's basketball has generated more points between scoring and assisting in a single season than Caitlin Clark. She is generating over 50 points per game for her team. If there was any way around not being a good defender, it's this. But the most impressive part is the efficiency. She's shooting 47% from the field, 40% from 3, and 85% from the free throw line. And this is with a ridiculous degree of difficulty. She's taking heavily contested shots or shooting several feet from the 3-point line. Caitlin Clark has improved defensively this year. She used to be a defensive liability, but now she's an average defender. Her ridiculous scoring and passing ability has led Iowa to a level of success that would not be possible otherwise. There's no other player that could take that roster, and they would be as good as they are. So that's why I have her at the top of the list. That's it for this top 10 video. Feel free to give your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. There will be some more top 10 videos coming out later this month, so stay tuned. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you later.